The wind came off the Hindu Kush like a blade sharp enough to cut through fabric, skin, and bone.
Target in
Kira
sight.
Brennan didn't move.
Awaiting
She had been lying in the
instructions.
same position for 11 hours, tucked deep inside a hide she'd carved into the mountainside before dawn. The ghillie suit draped across her shoulders blended perfectly with the rocks and dead grass. From 400 yards away, she was invisible. From 40 yards, she was invisible. That was the point. Her breathing stayed slow. 4 seconds and 6 seconds out. The rhythm of a heartbeat at rest. She had learned
Top
long
tier.
ago that the body remembers.
Adjust your aim
what the
2
mind
clicks to the
sometimes
right
forgets.
and focus on the lower
Calm
quadrant of the
is a
target.
choice. Control is a discipline. And on a mountain in Afghanistan, both could mean the difference between mission success and a flag-folded funeral. Through her scope, the compound below spread out like a model on a briefing table. Buildings arranged in a loose square. Vehicles parked in predetermined spots. Men moving along roads they had walked 100 times before. To anyone else, it looked routine, normal, safe. Kira saw something different. The compound had changed. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough. The guard rotations were too precise. Military precision, not militia casual. The vehicle placement had shifted 3 feet to the east overnight. The thermal signatures coming off the southern building didn't match the intelligence brief she had studied for the past 72 hours. Small details, the kind most people missed, the kind that got soldiers killed. She adjusted one gloved finger along the stock of her rifle. The weapon was an extension of her body now. Custom built, a .338 Lapua Magnum with a barrel she had broken in herself, firing 500 rounds until the rifling settled into its final form. The scope was calibrated to her eye, her breath, her heartbeat. At 800 yards, she could put a round through a playing card. At 1200, she could still hit center mass on a human target. She had done it before. She would do it again if the mission required it. But today, her orders were simple. Observe, report, do not engage. The radio crackled to life in her ear. Voices rolled across the frequency, casual and confident. SEAL Team 6, prepping for insertion. She recognized the tone. Men shaking off nerves, the way they always did, before stepping into the unknown. Jokes, banter, talk that kept fear at arm's length. One voice rose above the others, younger, cocky. You think that Ghost Range contractor is still awake up there? Or did she freeze her ass off already? Laughter followed. Brief, careless. Another voice chimed in. She's probably writing a complaint about the cold. Contractors, man, they get paid to sit around and look important. More laughter. Kira stayed silent. She had heard worse in briefing rooms and mess halls in the field. The mockery didn't bother her anymore. Let them laugh. Let them dismiss her. She had learned that proving herself through argument was a waste of breath. Proving herself through results was the only language that mattered. She keyed her mic. Her voice came through low and steady, stripped of emotion. Ghost Range to command. Movement patterns around the south building have changed in the last 15 minutes. Vehicle placement is inconsistent with brief. Thermal signatures don't match. Recommend delay on insertion for secondary assessment. A pause. Then a different voice. Older. Edged with impatience. Ghost Range, we copy. Stand by. Kira waited. The wind shifted slightly, brushing against her left cheek. She adjusted her scope a fraction of a degree, compensating automatically. The mirage, rising from the rocks below, told her the temperature was 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold front moving in, barometric pressure falling. She could feel it in the air. In the way the wind moved. In the way sound carried differently across the valley. The radio crackled again. Ghost Range recommendation noted. SEAL Team 6 is cleared for insertion. Maintain overwatch and report any changes. Do not engage. Acknowledge. Kira's jaw tightened. Just once. Then released. Ghost Range acknowledges. The frequency went quiet. She exhaled slowly, watching her breath fog in the cold air. They weren't listening. They never did. Not to contractors. Not to women. Not to anyone who didn't wear the right uniform or carry the right rank. On another channel, a voice came through. Older. Familiar. Rough around the edges, in a way only decades in the field could create. Ghost Range, this is Overwatch. You seeing what I'm seeing? Kira allowed herself the smallest hint of relief. Colonel Thaddeus Wolf, Marine Scout Sniper. 63 years old and still sharper than men half his age. He had trained her 6 years ago, back when she was still trying to prove she belonged. He had never questioned her, never doubted her. He simply watched her shoot, nodded once, and said, "You'll do." She keyed the private channel they shared, a frequency only the two of them used. Affirmative Overwatch. Thermal patterns are wrong. Guard rotations too clean. This doesn't feel like militia. Feels professional. Agreed. Wolf's voice carried decades of experience. Feels like Fulda Gap in 84. Everything too neat. Too rehearsed. Kira understood the reference. The Fulda Gap. Cold War. Soviet forces staging false movements to mask real intentions. Old school tactics requiring instinct more than technology. You try warning them, Wolf asked. They're not interested. A pause, then quieter. They will be. Kira didn't respond. She shifted her focus back to the valley. The Blackhawks were inbound now. She could hear the rotors in the distance. A low thumping that rolled across the rocks like distant thunder. Dust began to rise from the landing zone, swirling into the air in thick clouds. SEAL Team 6 was moving. She watched them through her scope. Professional, disciplined, everything by the book. Boots hit the ground in perfect sequence. Rifles came up. Sectors were covered. The formation moved with precision only years of training could produce. But the valley wasn't right. Kira's instincts screamed at her. The same instincts that had kept her alive through 4 tours. The same instincts that had warned her 2 years ago in a different valley, on a different mountain, when everything had looked just as clean and just as wrong. She had ignored those instincts once, just once, and Marcus Hayden had died because of it. The memory hit her like a fist to the chest. Marcus, his face, his voice, the way he smiled when he thought no one was watching, the way his hand felt in hers, the way his blood soaked into the dirt while she screamed for a medevac that came too late. She forced the memory down, buried it, locked it away in the part of her mind where all the dead lived. There was no room for grief on a mission, no space for regret, only focus, only the shot, only the breath between heartbeats. Below her, SEAL Team 6 advanced toward the compound, smooth, controlled, confident. Kira whispered under her breath. Not a prayer, not a plea, just a truth she felt in her bones. Not again. The first machine gun opened fire without warning. The sound tore through the valley like a chainsaw ripping metal. Muzzle flash erupted from the northern ridge 300 yards from the SEAL position. A second gun joined in from the west, then a third from the south. Interlocking fields of fire. Professional setup. Textbook ambush. SEAL Team 6 went flat. Voices exploded across the radio net. Sharp, immediate. Contact, 3 directions. Where the hell is that coming from? We're pinned. We're pinned down. Kira's world narrowed. Her breath slowed. Her heartbeat dropped. Everything outside the scope ceased to exist. She saw the northern gun emplacement, saw the crew operating it, saw the way they moved with trained precision. Not militia, not Taliban. These men had military training. American military training. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Orders echoed in her mind. Observe only. Do not engage. Do not reveal your position under any circumstance. But below, her men were dying. She could hear it in their voices. The edge of panic. The desperate calls for fire support that wasn't coming. The sound of rounds impacting so close that dirt and rock were spraying into the air. And something inside her snapped. Not with rage, not with fear, with clarity. She had made a promise 2 years ago, standing over Marcus's grave, her hand on the coffin, her voice barely a whisper. I won't let it happen again. Her hand moved, smooth, controlled. Years of muscle memory compressed into a single motion. She settled deeper into the earth. Her breathing flattened until it was almost invisible. Her heartbeat slowed until she could count the seconds between each pulse. The world went silent. She lined the crosshairs on the man directing fire from the northern ridge. Range 820 yards. Wind 8 miles per hour, quartering left. Temperature 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Air density 0.081. Coriolis effect. At this range, 2.1 inches right. The calculations took less than a second. Her body already knew the answers. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. Sound cracked across the valley, sharp and clean. Through the scope, she saw the target drop. Legs folded. Body crumpled. The machine gun went silent for 3 seconds while the crew tried to understand what had just happened. Kira didn't wait. She shifted her aim, recalculated the hold, fired again. Kill number 2, then a third. Kill number 3. Below her, SEAL Team 6 heard the distant rifle shots. Confusion rippled through the radio net. Who the hell is shooting? Is that air support? Negative. No birds on station. Then who? Kira didn't answer. She was already moving. 3 feet to her right. Flattening into another micro-hide she had prepared before dawn. She had carved a dozen of them into the hillside. Small depressions, barely visible, just deep enough to break her silhouette. She fired again. The machine gunner on the western ridge slumped over his weapon. Kill number 4. Another shift, another hide, another shot. Kill number 5. The enemy net came alive. Voices shouting in mixed languages, panic, confusion, men trying to locate her position. Return fire raked the ridgeline, but it was blind, desperate. They were shooting at ghosts. Kira breathed through it all, steady, controlled. Other valleys, other mountains, same dance with death. The SEALs scrambled toward better cover, moving one by one while she knocked down any fighter who tried to flank them. She could hear their voices on the net now. The fear was still there, but something else had crept in. Hope, belief, the understanding that someone somewhere was watching their backs. One voice cut through the chaos. Older, calmer. Chief Petty Officer Boone Maddox, whoever you are, keep shooting. Kira didn't respond. She shifted to another hide, fired low this time, hitting a runner trying to reposition a heavy weapon. Dust puffed off the ridge where he fell. Kill number 6. Enemy fighters began sweeping her hillside with suppressive fire. Rounds sparked off rocks inches above her back. She stayed pressed into the ground, counting the rhythm, calculating the pattern, waiting for the exact moment when she could move without being silhouetted against the sky. Then she moved again. Low, controlled, ghost-like. Every shot she fired bought the SEALs another few seconds of life. And then she heard it. A voice on the enemy frequency. Clean, clear, American. Not broken English. Not heavily accented commands. Pure Midwestern American. The kind of voice that belonged in a briefing room at Fort Bragg, not on a mountainside in Afghanistan. North Ridge. Locate the shooter. Target is female. High ground. Priority kill. Kira's blood went cold. They weren't hunting the SEALs. They were hunting her. She scanned the ridge again. The enemy movement patterns confirmed it. Fighters spreading in a deliberate sweep, a tightening ring aimed directly at her position. Their spacing was perfect. Their communication clean. Their discipline too sharp for local militia. These weren't Afghan fighters. These were professionals. On the private channel, Wolf's voice came through, low, urgent. Kira, if you can hear me, I know what you're seeing. She keyed her mic once. A single click. Acknowledgement. Wolf continued, I've been running intel on this for the past week. This operation was engineered. Those aren't local fighters down there. Black Ridge Solutions. Private military contractors gone rogue. Kira's grip on her rifle tightened. Wolf's voice dropped lower. They're not after Team 6. They're after you. Another click. She understood. Move when you can, Wolf said. They're sweeping your ridge. You're the primary target. Get out of there. Kira looked down the slope. The SEALs were still pinned in the wadi below. Alive because of her shots, but barely holding. The enemy ring creeping toward her ridge meant she had minutes, maybe less, before they boxed her in. If she left now, the full enemy force would crash straight down onto the wadi. The SEALs would be wiped out in under 5 minutes. She could save herself, or she could save them. Her breathing steadied. Her heartbeat slowed. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. She had made a promise on a grave to a man who would never hear her voice again. Never again. Kira pressed one knee into the ground and settled deeper into the rocks. If they wanted her, they would have to come through her first, and the mountain was on her side. She shifted her rifle back toward the valley. The enemy sweep was tightening, but they were making a mistake. They were so focused on finding her that they had left gaps in their coverage of the SEALs, small windows, brief opportunities. Kira took advantage of every single one. She dropped a fighter positioning for a flanking maneuver. Kill number 7. Then another adjusting mortar coordinates. Kill number 8. Each shot was clean, precise. No wasted ammunition. No second rounds needed. On the SEAL net, the voices were changing. The panic was still there, but something else had taken root. Respect. The dawning realization that whoever was up on that mountain was keeping them alive through sheer skill and will. Lieutenant Silas Crawford, the cocky one who had joked about the contractor, came over the net, breathless. Whoever that is, they just saved my life. Twice. Maddox responded, his voice tight. Then let's not waste it. Move to that wadi 30 yards north. Go. The team moved. Kira covered them. One fighter tried to cut them off. She put a round through his chest at 940 yards. He dropped before his finger reached the trigger. Kill number 9. Crawford's voice came through again, quieter this time. Did you see that shot? I saw it, Maddox said. Now move. Kira allowed herself a single breath of satisfaction. They were learning to trust the invisible hand that kept reaching down from the mountain to pull them out of the fire. But the enemy was learning too. The sweep tightened. She could see them now, moving with purpose. A dozen fighters climbing her ridge from 3 different angles. Coordinated. Professional. Closing the noose. She shifted hides again. Fired twice. Dropped 2 climbers. But there were too many. For every one, she dropped 2 more appeared. Her radio crackled. Wolf's voice. Kira, you need to move now. They're 3 minutes from your position. She keyed her mic. Negative. Seals still pinned. God damn it, Kira. I'm not leaving them. A pause. Then Wolf's voice came back. Different now. Not commanding. Understanding. Then I'm coming to you. Negative. Hold your position. I need your eyes. Another pause. Copy. But Kira, this is a setup. The whole operation. They knew you'd be here. They planned this. Kira's mind raced. A setup. Targeting her specifically. But why? The answer came like a punch to the gut. 2 years ago. The ambush that killed Marcus. She had been there. She had seen things. Equipment that didn't belong. Technology that wasn't in the brief. She had asked questions afterward. Written reports. Pushed for answers. Then the reports had disappeared. The questions had been dismissed, and she had been quietly moved to a different unit. Someone had been covering something up, and now they were trying to erase the witness. Her hands tightened on her rifle, not with fear, with controlled fury, the kind that sharpened focus instead of clouding it. They wanted her dead. They were going to be disappointed. She slid backward out of her hide, moving in a crouch along the ridgeline. The enemy fighters were close now, close enough that she could hear their boots on rock, close enough that she could hear their breathing. She reached a narrow draw that angled down toward the valley. It was steep, exposed, a nightmare run under fire, but it was the only way to reach the seals. Kira took one breath. Then she sprinted. The world exploded around her. Gunfire erupted from 3 positions simultaneously. Rounds cracked past her head, her shoulders, her legs. One bullet tore through the ghillie netting on her back, close enough to tug the fabric. Another sparked off a rock inches from her boot. She didn't slow down. Her legs pumped. Her lungs burned cold air. Her boots scraped against loose shale, sending rocks tumbling down the slope ahead of her. She weaved between outcrops using terrain, like a fighter uses footwork, never staying on a predictable line, never giving them a clean shot. A machine gun opened up from her left. She felt the pressure wave of rounds passing close enough to move air against her skin. She dove behind a boulder, rolled, came up running. 50 yards to go. A fighter appeared on her right, rifle coming up. She didn't break stride. Drew her sidearm mid-run, fired twice, center mass. The man dropped, 30 yards. The gunfire intensified. They realized she was escaping. Concentrated fire on her position. Rock chips exploded around her. Dust filled the air, 20 yards. She could see the wadi now. Could see the seals clustered below. Could see their faces turning up toward her. Shock and disbelief written across every expression. 10 yards. She launched herself off a ledge, dropped 8 feet, landed hard, rolled, and came up inside the wadi with her rifle ready. The seals stared at her. Kira Brennan stood before them, breathing hard but controlled. Ghillie strips hung from her shoulders, torn and dusty. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat. Blood seeped from a graze on her left forearm she hadn't even noticed taking. Her eyes were calm, clear, focused. She looked at them for 1 second, then spoke, her voice steady despite the sprint and the gunfire and the impossible run she had just made. "Where are you taking casualties?" Lieutenant Crawford blinked. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Who the hell are you?" Chief Maddox held up a hand. He had seen enough combat to recognize something real when it stood in front of him. He pointed toward the eastern corner of the wadi. 3 wounded, 1 serious. We're trying to push toward that ridge opening, but there's a machine gun nest tearing us apart every time we move. Kira looked up the hill. Calculated angles, distance, wind, elevation. She didn't speak, didn't explain. She simply turned and ran straight uphill, alone. Maddox shouted after her, "You can't go up there, they'll cut you apart." But Kira was already gone, sprinting through loose gravel, weaving between rocks as rounds cracked around her. 1 bullet passed so close to her shoulder that it tugged a strand of her ghillie suit. Another kicked up dirt between her legs. She kept moving. Her lungs screamed, her legs burned. The wound on her arm sent sharp jolts of pain up to her shoulder with every swing of her rifle. She ignored all of it, Pain was temporary. Death was permanent. And the SEALs below her would die if she didn't silence that gun. She reached the ledge 30 feet above the machine gun position, dropped flat, swung her rifle into place. The gunner below was focused on the wadi, never saw her coming. She fired once. Kill number 10. The machine gun went silent. The valley seemed to hold its breath. From below, the SEALs watched in stunned silence as the gunner slumped over his weapon. Clean, immediate, perfect. Kira stood for a moment on the ledge, a dark silhouette against the Afghan sky. Then she turned and jogged back down the slope with the same calm she might show after a morning run. She dropped back into the wadi and knelt beside the nearest SEAL without a word. The whisper started immediately. That was her. Did you see that run? She made that shot like it was nothing. Who is she? Kira ignored them. She pointed toward the northern ridgeline. There's a ravine 300 yards north. The Serpent's Cut. Tight funnel. Only one way in. If we can reach it, you'll have defensible ground. Maddox studied her face. Something in her eyes. Something in the way she carried herself. Absolute certainty, born from living on mountains and understanding their secrets. You sure? Kira met his eyes for the first time. I'm sure. Maddox didn't know why he believed her, but he did. Move out, he barked to his team. As SEAL Team 6 advanced, Kira floated along their flank. She didn't stay with them, didn't walk in formation. She ghosted through the rocks and draws, appearing and disappearing like smoke. And every time she appeared, someone died. A climber sneaking up the eastern rock face. Dead. Kill number 11. A spotter lining up coordinates for mortar fire. Dead. Kill number 12. An enemy fighter drawing a bead on a wounded operator who couldn't move fast enough. Down. She barely spoke. Only pointed or whispered directions when absolutely necessary. But every time she fired, someone lived. Every time she moved, the team moved with more confidence. They were starting to understand. Somewhere above them, another rifle cracked. Different cadence, different rhythm. Colonel Wolf had joined the fight. His rounds came from a higher ridge, clean and sharp. Old-school Marine precision. The dual presence of two unseen shooters carved holes in the enemy advance, breaking angles, scattering formations, forcing fighters to duck behind rocks instead of pressing forward. Crawford realized it first. We've got two of them up there. Whoever they are, they're keeping us alive. Maddox's voice was grim. Then let's not waste the gift. Keep moving. But the pressure never eased. The enemy force was larger than any of them had expected. Better equipped, better trained. They weren't resisting. They were hunting. Every 100 yards brought another burst of fire. Ammunition dropped faster than anyone wanted to count. One operator was being carried by two others, his legs soaked in blood. Another stumbled dizzy from a graze wound that had creased his skull. Kira kept shooting, kept moving, kept breathing through the pain building in her shoulder from the earlier descent. Her face stayed calm, even as rounds sparked around her boots or tore chunks from the rocks beside her head. Other valleys, other mountains, same instincts keeping her alive. Marcus had taught her that. Marcus, who had held her hand during her first firefight and whispered, "Fear means you're alive, use it." Marcus, who had died because she hadn't trusted her instincts. Marcus, who she would never fail again. The ground shifted beneath them. The terrain narrowed. Walls began rising on both sides. The mouth of the ravine opened ahead, like a dark throat carved into the earth. The Serpent's Cut. Kira had seen it hours earlier through her scope, had studied its angles and approaches, had known exactly how it could be used. One way in, one way out. A defender's dream, an attacker's nightmare. Maddox took one look and nodded. Set positions. Get the wounded inside. SEAL Team 6 spilled into the ravine, scrambling to establish firing lines. Kira climbed halfway up the ravine wall, finding a natural ledge that gave her a clean angle back toward the entrance. Enemy fighters appeared on the ridge behind them, racing to cut off the team before they could dig in. Wolf's fire clipped 3 before they could set up weapons. Kira dropped another pair before they got within 50 yards. But for every fighter, they dropped more seemed to appear. Shadows spilling across the rocks with ruthless purpose. Wolf's voice crackled faintly in her headset. Strained, but steady. Kira, you're almost there. Keep them moving. She didn't answer. Her body was already bracing for the next wave. Ammunition low. Team wounded. Enemy tightening. They had made it into the Serpent's Cut. But the real fight had only just begun. And somewhere out there moving through the enemy formation, with the confidence of a man who believed the outcome was already decided, came the one person Kira had never expected to see again. The one person whose face would change everything. The formation of enemy fighters shifted, creating a lane, making space for someone moving through the center. Kira's scope tracked the movement. Professional, organized, like watching a military honor guard part for a commanding officer. The man who stepped forward wasn't rushing, wasn't shouting. He moved with calm authority, earned through decades of command. Broad shoulders, squared stance, head up like he owned every inch of ground beneath his boots. Kira's scope caught his face, and the world stopped. Garrett Calloway. The breath left her lungs, not in fear, in recognition, in the terrible clarity of a truth she had suspected but never wanted to believe. Her hands didn't shake. Her heartbeat didn't spike, but something deep inside her chest tightened like a knot being pulled against itself. She knew that face, had trusted that face, had watched that face smile at Marcus's jokes and nod at his observations and shake his hand at the end of every mission. Marcus's team leader, his mentor, his friend, the man who had written the after-action report that blamed Marcus for poor judgment, the man who had stood at Marcus's memorial with cold eyes and left before the service was over, the man who had disappeared 6 months later without a word. And now he was here, leading the enemy, hunting her. Lieutenant Crawford had positioned himself below her ledge, firing between rocks. He glanced up and caught the change in her expression, the way her jaw tightened, the way her breathing shifted for just a moment. "You know him," Crawford said quietly. Not a question, a statement. Kira didn't deny it, didn't need to. The truth hung between them like smoke. Down in the ravine, Maddox reloaded behind a boulder. Sweat streaked through the dust on his forehead. He had been watching Kira long enough now. The impossible shots, the calm under fire, the way she read terrain like a map she had memorized years ago. He whispered it before he even realized the words had slipped out. "She's not just a contractor." At that exact moment, Wolf's voice came through the radio. Not shouting, not stressed, just with that same steady tone he had used on firing ranges long before this day existed. "SEAL Team 6, listen up. Sergeant Kira Brennan is the best long-range shooter I have ever trained. And I've trained a lot of them." The words dropped into the ravine like a stone thrown into still water. Every SEAL froze. Crawford stared at Kira as if seeing her for the first time. Maddox lifted his head with slow understanding. Even the wounded turned their faces toward the ledge where she lay, poised behind her rifle, calm as carved stone. All the whispers, all the doubts, all the assumptions, they fell away in a single breath. The valley went quiet, not from lack of gunfire, but from the shift inside the men who finally understood who had been saving them. Shot after shot, hide after hide, hour after hour. Respect didn't need an announcement. It arrived in silence. And on the ledge above them, Kira Brennan steadied her rifle on the rock and centered her crosshairs on Garrett Calloway's chest. Her finger moved to the trigger. The wind shifted. And across 800 yards of Afghan Valley, two pairs of eyes met through glass and scope. Calloway smiled, raised his hand, tapped his wrist. "We have time." Then he drew his finger slowly across his throat. "Next time." The ravine narrowed into a twisting throat of stone. Walls rose high on both sides until the sky became nothing more than a thin strip of pale light above them. SEAL Team 6 moved with disciplined urgency, dragging wounded deeper inside, placing claymores in tight bends, stacking ammunition where hands could reach it fast. Boots scraped against rock. Breath came sharp and controlled. No one wasted words. Kira climbed higher on the ravine wall, bracing her back against rough stone. Blood had soaked through the makeshift wrap on her left forearm, sticky and warm against her skin. She pressed it once, testing the pain, then ignored it completely. Pain wasn't her concern. The entrance to the Serpent's Cut was. That was where the avalanche was coming from. Wolf's first shot cracked through the canyon, echoing off stone walls like a whip crack. Kira fired half a second later, her rhythm syncing with his the way it had 6 years ago, on training ranges when he had taught her to read wind through grass movement and mirage shimmer. Then the enemy answered. Shouts, gunfire, boots pounding across rock. The first wave spilled into the ravine mouth like floodwater finding a crack in a dam. Rifles up, firing wild bursts as they tried to force their way through the narrow opening. Discipline held them together, even as bullets from above began dropping them. Kira took two immediately. Center mass, clean kills, No wasted rounds. Wolf dropped a third from his higher position. The SEALs detonated the first claymore. The explosion lit the cut with a white flash that slapped against the walls and rolled back on itself. Dust and smoke billowed past Kira's ledge, like fog rolling in from the ocean. She stayed locked into her rifle, breathing shallow, eyes focused through the scope. Shapes emerged through the haze. Fighters climbing over bodies of the fallen, pressing forward with determination born from professional training and professional pay. These weren't militants fighting for ideology. These were contractors fighting for a paycheck, and that made them predictable. Kira's shoulder screamed every time she adjusted her aim, the earlier graze wound sending jolts of pain up her neck. She didn't slow. One shot clipped a climber trying to scale the ravine wall for a flanking position. Another dropped a man dragging a machine gun toward a covered position near the mouth. The ground trembled with every detonation, every burst of automatic fire. Rock dust filled the air until breathing required deliberate effort. A round caught Kira across the upper shoulder as she tracked a runner moving between cover points. Not the graze from before. This was clean contact. The impact slammed her back against stone. Her vision flashed white. Her rifle slipped in her grip. Pain exploded through her shoulder like someone had driven a railroad spike through the joint. Crawford shouted from below, "You're hit! Get down here!" Kira pushed her palm against the rock wall. Her hand came away bloody. She looked at it for 1 second, then wiped it on her pants and forced the rifle back into position against her good shoulder. The movement sent fresh waves of agony through her body. She bit down hard, tasted copper, and steadied her breathing. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but the conviction in it was unmistakable. If she let herself fall now, the line would buckle. The team didn't need another casualty being dragged to the back. They needed her eyes on that entrance. They needed every shot she could still make. Wolf's voice crackled in her ear. "Stay with me, Kira." She keyed her mic once. Acknowledgement. No words needed. The enemy pushed again. More organized this time. More coordinated. Squad-level tactics executed with precision. Bounding overwatch. Suppressive fire. Movement under cover. These men knew what they were doing. Kira fired as fast as her training allowed. Wolf mirrored her cadence from above. SEAL rifles thundered below. Brass bouncing off stone in metallic rain. The sound was deafening, compressed by the ravine walls until it became a physical force. But the waves kept coming. The attackers didn't break, didn't retreat. They surged forward with the persistence of a tide that knew the rocks would eventually wear down. And then, through the smoke and dust and chaos, Garrett Calloway stepped into view. He moved up the slope with controlled aggression, his voice cutting through the gunfire like a blade through silk. Sharp, clear, commanding. "Left flank, suppress that ledge. Second squad, move on my mark." Fighters shifted instantly. The entire kill zone reorganized itself around his words. This wasn't a man giving suggestions. This was a man orchestrating violence with the casual expertise of a conductor leading a symphony. Kira centered her scope on him, but Calloway wasn't still. He paced between cover points, gesturing, directing, moving with tactical awareness, earned through decades in the field. Every time she had a shot, something blocked her angle. A rock. A fighter moving into her line. Smoke drifting at exactly the wrong moment. Every time the smoke cleared, he had already moved. Her heartbeat stayed steady. She waited. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon. Rush the shot, and you miss. Miss, and you die. Or worse, someone else dies because you weren't good enough. The memory came unbidden. Colorado Rockies, November 2022. 27 months ago, but it felt like yesterday. She had been on the southern ridge, Marcus on the northern. A training exercise that felt wrong from the start. Calloway had ordered them to split up. Marcus had questioned it on private channel. "Doesn't feel right. Why separate the sniper team?" Calloway's response had been cold. "Those are your orders, Sergeant." Marcus had complied. He always did. That was who he was. A soldier who followed orders even when his instincts screamed otherwise. 3 hours later, the ambush. Machine gun fire from positions that weren't in the brief, weren't on any map, weren't supposed to exist. Marcus's voice on the radio. Shocked, confused, afraid. Where did they come from? "This isn't OP4. This isn't part of the exercise." Then screaming. Gunfire that went on too long, and finally silence. Kira had tried to reach him, sprinted across a mile of rough terrain, but too far, too late, always too late. By the time she arrived, Marcus was dead. 3 other Rangers wounded, blood soaking into frozen ground, and equipment that didn't belong. Advanced targeting systems with manufacturer labels she didn't recognize. AI-assisted drones with capabilities beyond anything she'd seen in theater. Technology that shouldn't exist in a training exercise. She had taken photos with her phone, documented everything, written a detailed report, asked questions that made people uncomfortable. Her report disappeared within 72 hours. Digital file corrupted. Hard copy lost in transit. Convenient. The questions were dismissed. Above your clearance level, Sergeant. Drop it. Transfer orders came down 1 week later. Immediate reassignment. No explanation. Just needs of the service.
Calloway's after-action report blamed Marcus. Sergeant Hayden displayed poor judgment. Advanced without proper clearance. Ignored established protocols. Failed to maintain situational awareness. Lies. All of it. Marcus was the most careful operator she had ever known. Methodical. Thorough. He never took unnecessary risks. At the funeral, Calloway had stood in the back, eyes cold, face expressionless. He left before the service ended. Didn't speak to her. Didn't speak to Marcus's parents. Just walked away like he had somewhere more important to be. 6 months later, he was gone. Vanished from Army rolls. No forwarding address.
No explanation. Just erased. And now, he was here. In Afghanistan. Leading contractors. Hunting her. Wolf fired at Calloway first. The round cracked past his head, missing by inches. Calloway didn't even flinch. Just shifted position and kept barking orders. Kira let her rifle sway with her breathing. Small movements. Natural rhythm. Fighting the motion created tension. Tension created shake. She had learned long ago to become part of the weapon instead of controlling it. Calloway stepped onto a boulder to shout another command. The smoke thinned just enough for her to see his full silhouette against the darker rock behind him. Her crosshair swept past him, then back. She felt the rhythm of her breath, the pulse in her neck, the exact moment when everything aligned. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked. Through the scope, she saw Calloway jerk backward, his legs folded underneath him. He dropped behind the boulder, disappearing from view. The fighters around him froze, just for 3 seconds. Just long enough for confusion to crack their coordination. The SEALs reclaimed 20 yards of ground in those 3 seconds. But the fight wasn't over. Wolf's voice came through her headset. Quiet, almost apologetic. Kira, he's moving. Body armor caught it. She had known. Even as she fired, part of her had known. The shot placement had been good, but not perfect. In that split second, with smoke drifting and targets moving, she had taken the shot she had rather than the shot she wanted. Where is he now, she asked. Being extracted. His people are pulling him back. He's wounded but mobile. Kira absorbed this information without reaction. Part of her had expected it. Men like Calloway didn't die easy. An RPG operator rushed into view at the ravine entrance, lifting the launcher toward a cluster of wounded SEALs huddled near the back wall. Doc Anders was crouched over one of them, hands red with blood, completely exposed. Kira saw him before anyone else did. She reached for another magazine. Her hand closed on empty pouches. She checked again. Nothing. 3 rounds left. Chambered and ready in her current magazine. That was it. She didn't hesitate. Didn't calculate odds or weigh options. The decision had already been made the moment she saw the RPG. She fired. The operator dropped. The rocket spiraled upward, impacting harmlessly against the far cliff wall. The explosion rained debris down on the ravine, but away from the SEALs. Maddox threw his body over the wounded anyway, shielding them with his own mass, as rock chips pelted his back. 2 rounds left, but a second RPG operator appeared, already shouldering the launcher. Aiming at the medical cluster, Kira's hands moved smoothly. Recalculated. Fired. The second operator fell. 1 round left. A third fighter rushed forward with another launcher. The last man, the final threat. Kira settled her breathing, found her rhythm. The world narrowed to the space between heartbeats. She fired her final round. Through the scope, she watched the third operator collapse. Her bolt locked back, empty. She keyed her radio. Voice weak but clear. Ghost range is Winchester. 12 kills confirmed. Now it's your fight, boys. Below her, the SEALs tightened their perimeter. Wolf fired 1 more shot, then went silent. Either repositioning or out of ammunition. She couldn't tell. The enemy hesitated at the ravine entrance. Their formation had bled heavily. Calloway was down.
The momentum had shifted. In the distance, faint at first, then growing louder. Rotors. Real rotors this time. Not the wrong call sign. Not false hope. The sound built into the canyon, vibrating through stone. The unmistakable thunder of salvation ripping across the sky. Dust swirled upward as two Blackhawks swept in fast and low. Gunners scanning terrain, the weapons ready behind them. Higher up, a pair of Apache gunships took overwatch positions. The fighters at the ravine mouth began falling back, dragging their wounded, abandoning equipment. Within moments, the coordinated assault collapsed into retreat. SEAL Team 6 exhaled as one. Some slumped against rocks. Others kept their rifles up, not quite believing the threat had passed. Maddox stood slowly, dust and debris sliding off his shoulders. Kira lowered her rifle. For the first time since the fight began, she let herself feel the full weight of exhaustion pressing down on her bones. Her shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. Her hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline crash. Blood loss was making the edges of her vision soft. But she was alive, and so were they. She didn't look for praise, didn't search for reactions. She just listened to the distant thump of approaching helicopters and let the weight of the night settle quietly into her chest. The immediate danger had passed, but something else was just beginning. Crawford climbed up to her ledge, moving carefully on the loose rock. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, his eyes carrying exhaustion, born from dancing with death for hours. He stopped a few feet away, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You saved us," he said quietly. "All of us. Multiple times." Kira didn't respond, just met his eyes and waited. "I doubted you," Crawford continued. His voice dropped lower, carrying genuine regret. "On the radio before insertion, I was one of the voices making jokes. Mountain Princess. I said that. I was wrong." Kira studied his face, saw the sincerity there, the humility that combat could teach if a man was willing to learn. "Now you know," she said simply. Crawford nodded slowly. Then his expression shifted. "That man down there, Calloway. When you saw him, your whole body changed. Who is he to you?" Kira was quiet for a long moment. The sound of rotors grew louder, closer. She could see the lead Blackhawk approaching the valley now, nose down, moving fast. "He was Marcus Hayden's team leader," she said finally. "Delta Force. 12 years of operations together. Marcus trusted him with his life," Crawford asked, hearing the unfinished story in her tone. And 2 years ago, Marcus died in an ambush. Calloway wrote the after-action report. Blamed Marcus for poor tactical judgment, for pushing too hard, for ignoring warning signs. She paused, her jaw tightening. 6 months later, Calloway disappeared, left the army, vanished. Crawford was quiet, processing. "You think he set up the ambush that killed Marcus?" "I know he did." Kira's voice carried absolute certainty. "I just didn't have proof until today." Below them, Maddox was organizing the wounded for evacuation. His voice carried up the ravine wall, calm and professional, despite everything they had just survived. "Team, listen up. First bird is for critical wounds. Second bird for walking wounded and gear. We move in 60 seconds. Stay sharp until we're airborne." Levi Holt, the young SEAL, Kira had shielded during the movement to the ravine, looked up toward her ledge. His leg was wrapped in blood-soaked bandages, but he was alive, conscious. He caught her eye and nodded once. A warrior's acknowledgement. No words needed. Kira returned the nod. Wolf's voice came through on their private channel. "Kira, you still breathing up there?" "Affirmative." "Good, because we need to talk about what just happened and what's about to happen." "Copy. Calloway's not dead. I saw him move after your shot. Body armor caught it. He's wounded but mobile." Kira absorbed this information without reaction. Part of her had known. "Where is he now?" she asked. "Being extracted by his people. Half a click east. Private helicopter. They'll have him out of country in 4 hours. Not if I can help it." "Kira," Wolf's voice carried warning. "Let it go for now. We have wounded. We have a team that needs you alive more than they need Calloway dead. You've done enough." "Have I?" The question hung in the air between them. Wolf sighed. "Yes, you have." Marcus would say the same thing. The name hit her like a physical blow. Marcus would say the same thing. Would he, or would Marcus want the man who betrayed him brought to justice? She didn't have time to answer. The first Blackhawk was landing, rotors kicking up a storm of dust and debris. Medics jumped out before the skids fully touched ground, running toward the ravine with stretchers and medical bags. Maddox climbed up to her position. His face was hard-lined with fatigue, but his eyes were clear and focused.
Can you walk? He asked. Yes. Will you walk? Or do I need to have 2 of my men carry you? Kira looked at him, saw the concern beneath the gruff exterior. This was a man who had led teams through hell and understood the thin line between courage and stupidity. I'll walk, she said. Good, because I need to talk to you once we're in the air about what happened here, about who you are, and about what comes next. He turned and headed back down. Kira followed, moving carefully on the loose rock. Her shoulders screamed with each movement, but she kept her face neutral. Pain was temporary. Reputation was permanent. At the bottom of the ravine, Doc Anders intercepted her. He was a compact man in his early 30s, with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much trauma. Let me look at that shoulder, he said. Not a request. Kira started to refuse, but Maddox's voice cut through. That's an order, Brennan. Let him work. She sat on a boulder, while Anders cut away the torn, gilly fabric and examined the wound. His fingers were gentle but thorough, probing the entry and exit points. Through and through, he said. Missed the bone. Missed the major vessels. You got lucky. Doesn't feel lucky, Kira said. It is. Trust me. He packed the wound with gauze and wrapped it tight. You need surgery. Proper surgery, not field medicine. That's going in my report. Noted. The helicopter cycled through. Critical wounded first. Holt was carried on a stretcher, his face pale but determined. As they loaded him, he reached out and caught Kira's hand. Thank you, he said, for the shield, for the cover, for everything. Kira squeezed his hand once. Stay alive. That's all the thanks I need. He smiled weakly and let the medics take him. The second bird came for the walking wounded and gear. Crawford supervised the loading, checking equipment, counting heads, making sure nothing was left behind that could compromise future operations. Maddox pulled Kira aside while the organized chaos swirled around them. I need to know something, he said quietly. Are you Army Marines? What's your background? Army Ranger. Sniper qualified. 4 tours. Contractor for the past 18 months. Maddox nodded slowly. And that performance up there. That's standard for you. That's what I'm trained to do. No. Maddox shook his head. What you did went beyond training. I've worked with the best shooters in the SEAL community. What I saw today was something else. Something rare. Kira didn't respond. Didn't know what to say. Compliments had always made her uncomfortable. Maddox continued. When we get back, there's going to be questions about the operation, about the ambush, about why a contractor disobeyed direct orders and engaged. You need to be ready for that. I know. And you need to know that every man on this team is going to back your story. Whatever you need said, we'll say it. You saved 12 lives today. We don't forget that. Something in Kira's chest tightened. Not with pain, with something else. Recognition, acceptance. The acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Thank you, Chief. Don't thank me. Just get on the bird and get that shoulder fixed. That's an order. The final Black Hawk settled into the landing zone. Kira climbed aboard, settling into the web seating along the bulkhead. Maddox sat across from her. Crawford took the seat next to her, his presence somehow reassuring despite their rocky start. The helicopter lifted off, banking hard away from the valley. Through the open door, Kira watched the Serpent's Cut recede into the distance. Smoke still rose from various points where the battle had raged. Bodies lay scattered across the approaches, testament to the violence that had unfolded. And somewhere out there, Garrett Calloway was escaping. The thought burned in her mind. He had killed Marcus, had hunted her, had orchestrated this entire operation to eliminate witnesses to whatever crime he had committed 2 years ago. And he was getting away. Wolf's voice came through her headset. I can hear you thinking from here. Let it go, Kira, for now. How can I? She asked, knowing the entire crew could hear her on the internal net. Because you're wounded. Because you've been fighting for 12 hours straight. Because the team needs you intact, not broken. He paused. And because Calloway isn't going anywhere we can't find him. Kira looked out the door at the Afghan landscape sliding past below. Mountains and valleys that had swallowed armies throughout history. Beautiful and brutal in equal measure. What did you mean earlier? She asked. About this operation being engineered. Wolf was quiet for a moment. Then his voice came through. Careful. Measured. I've been tracking anomalies for the past 3 weeks. Intel reports that didn't match field observations. Equipment requisitions that went missing. Communications intercepts that mentioned something called Phantom Protocol. What is it? That's what I'm still trying to figure out, but I know it involves Black Ridge Solutions. I know it involves stolen military technology, and I know it involves eliminating anyone who might have seen that technology in use. Kira's mind raced. 2 years ago, the ambush that killed Marcus. There was equipment there that didn't match the brief. Targeting systems, drones, technology that shouldn't have been in theater. What happened when you reported it? Wolf asked. My report disappeared. I was told the equipment was classified and above my clearance. Then I was transferred to a different unit. Who authorized the transfer? I don't know. It came down from somewhere above my command chain. Maddox leaned forward, listening intently. You're saying this goes higher than Calloway? I'm saying Calloway is a symptom, not the disease, Wolf said. He's a contractor now, works for Black Ridge. But someone is feeding them information. Someone with access to operational planning. Someone who knew Brennan would be on that mountain today. The implications settled over the crew like a cold blanket. An inside threat. Someone in the command structure actively working against American forces. Crawford spoke up. How high does it go? I don't know yet, Wolf admitted, but I'm going to find out. The helicopter banked again, approaching the forward operating base. Below, Kira could see the familiar layout of concrete barriers, guard towers, and prefab buildings that made up the American presence in this corner of Afghanistan. Home, for whatever that word was worth. As they approached the landing pad, Kira noticed something. A cluster of vehicles near the operations center. More than usual, and men in suits instead of uniforms. Investigators. Already here, already waiting. We've got company, sir? Maddox said, seeing the same thing. Let me do the talking, Kira said quietly. Negative, we all talk together. That's how teams work. The Black Hawk touched down. Medics rushed forward for the wounded, but the men in suits hung back, watching, waiting for Kira specifically. She climbed out of the helicopter, ignoring the way her shoulder screamed with each movement. Her ghillie suit was torn and bloody. Her face was streaked with dirt and dried blood. She looked like she had been through a war, because she had. 2 men in khakis and polo shirts approached. Contractors themselves, probably, or intelligence. The kind of men who fought wars with paperwork instead of rifles. The older one spoke first. He was in his 50s, with gray hair, and the kind of tan that came from years in desert postings. Sergeant Brennan, yes? I'm Anderson. This is Brooks. We need to debrief you about what happened today. I need medical attention first. We have medics standing by, but we need your account while it's fresh. Maddox stepped up beside her. She needs surgery, not a conversation. Anderson's eyes shifted to Maddox. Cold, assessing. And you are Chief Petty Officer Boone Maddox, SEAL Team 6. And I'm telling you that this woman saved my entire team today. She's wounded, she's exhausted, and she's earned the right to see a doctor before she sees an investigator. This is a sensitive situation, Chief. We have protocols. So do I. And mine says my people get medical care before they get interrogated. The 2 men stared at each other. A test of wills playing out on the tarmac while helicopters cycled around them and wounded were loaded into ambulances. Finally, Anderson stepped back. Fine, but we'll need to talk soon. She's not going anywhere, Maddox said. They watched the investigators walk away. Crawford let out a long breath. This is going to get complicated, he said. It already is, Kira replied. Doc Anders appeared with a stretcher crew. Your chariot awaits. I can walk. You can also pass out from blood loss. Which would you prefer? Kira looked at the stretcher, then at the medical tent 50 yards away, then back at Anders. Pride warred with pragmatism. Pragmatism won. Fine. They loaded her onto the stretcher. As they carried her toward the medical tent, she caught sight of Wolf standing near the operations center. He was older, grayer than when she had last seen him in person, but his eyes were the same, sharp, missing nothing. He nodded once, a promise. This isn't over. She nodded back, agreement. The last thing she saw before they carried her inside was the mountains rising in the distance, dark against the fading light. Beautiful and terrible. The place where she had fired 12 shots to save 12 lives, and where Garrett Calloway had escaped to fight another day. Inside the medical tent, surgeons prepped her for the operating room. Local anesthetic, irrigation of the wound, debridement. The clinical terms floated around her while hands worked efficiently on her shoulder. But her mind was elsewhere. Back in the valley, back in the ravine, back on that ledge with Garrett Calloway in her crosshairs. She had taken the shot, had hit him, but he had survived. And somewhere right now, he was being evacuated out of country, back to whatever hole Black Ridge operated from, beyond reach, beyond justice. The anesthetic started to take effect. The pain receded. Her thoughts grew fuzzy around the edges. Marcus appeared in her mind, not the way he had died, but the way he had lived, smiling, laughing, his hand in hers on a rare day off, when they had pretended the war didn't exist. I'm sorry, she whispered. I had the shot. I should have made it count. But Marcus's voice, in her memory, said something different. Something he had told her once, after a mission had gone sideways and she had spent days second-guessing every decision. You did what you could with what you had. That's all anyone can ask. The rest is just noise. The drugs pulled her under, into darkness, into dreamless sleep, where the weight of the day couldn't follow. But even in sleep, part of her mind kept working, kept processing, kept planning. Because this wasn't over. Calloway was still alive, still free, still dangerous. And Kira Brennan had made a promise 2 years ago, on a grave that she intended to keep. Kira woke to the soft beep of a heart monitor and the antiseptic smell that belonged exclusively to military hospitals. The ceiling above her was too white, too clean, too far from the dust and rock and blood of the mountains. Walter Reed Medical Center. She had been medevaced stateside while unconscious. Her left shoulder was wrapped in thick bandages, immobilized in a sling that kept her arm locked against her chest. Every tiny movement reminded her of the round that had torn through her. The pain was manageable, now filtered through medication, but still present enough to keep her grounded in reality. Sunlight slanted through the window, an angle that suggested late afternoon. She had no idea what day it was, no idea how long she had been out. The door opened quietly. A nurse stepped in, saw her awake, and smiled with professional warmth.
Welcome back, Sergeant Brennan. How are you feeling? Like I got shot. That's accurate. The nurse checked her vitals, made notes on a tablet. You've been out for about 36 hours. The surgery went well. No permanent damage to the rotator cuff, but you'll need physical therapy. Doctor will be by in an hour to discuss recovery timeline. Kira nodded. Has anyone been asking about me? The nurse's expression shifted slightly. Several people. Military investigators came by twice. A Colonel Wolf has called 4 times, and there's a group of men in the waiting room who refuse to leave until they know you're okay.
Despite everything, Kira felt something close to a smile tug at her mouth. SEALs? I think so. Very polite, but very stubborn. That sounds about right. I'll let them know you're awake, but the investigators asked to be notified immediately when you regained consciousness. Let the SEALs in first. The nurse hesitated. The investigators were very clear about their priority. So am I. They locked eyes for a moment. Then the nurse nodded. I'll give you 15 minutes before I make the call. Thank you. 10 minutes later, Chief Maddox, Lieutenant Crawford, and Doc Anders filed into her room. They looked cleaner than the last time she had seen them. Showered, rested, but their eyes still carried the weight of what they had survived together. Maddox pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down heavily. You look terrible. You should see the other guy. We did. On satellite imagery. Calloway made it to a Black Ridge extraction point. Private helicopter flew him to Pakistan. Trail goes cold after that. Kira's jaw tightened. He's gone, Crawford said. He stood near the window, arms crossed. For now. But Wolf's team is tracking him. They've got resources you don't know about. What kind of resources? Maddox leaned forward. Resources that can make contractors disappear if they become inconvenient. Calloway stepped in something big. Bigger than just killing your partner. The Pentagon is paying attention now. Doc Anders spoke from where he leaned against the wall. How's the shoulder? Really hurts. Good. Means the nerves are intact. You'll have full range of motion back in 6 to 8 weeks if you do the therapy right. If you push too hard, too fast, you'll make it worse. Noted. The door opened again. 2 men in civilian clothes entered without knocking. The same investigators from the airfield, Anderson and Brooks. Their expressions were professionally neutral, but Kira could read the tension in their shoulders. Gentlemen, we need the room, Anderson said. Maddox didn't move. We're not going anywhere. This is a classified debriefing. You don't have clearance. I have 12 men who are alive because of her. That's all the clearance I need. Brooks stepped forward, his voice harder. Chief, you're interfering with an official investigation. Don't make this difficult. Crawford moved away from the window, positioning himself between the investigators and Kira's bed. His body language spoke volumes. Protective. Ready. The kind of stance that said violence was an option if necessary. The room went quiet. Tense. A standoff playing out in a hospital room over a wounded woman's bed. Kira spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. It's okay. Let them ask their questions. Maddox looked at her. You sure? I am, but you don't leave the building. Understood. Understood. Right? He stood and nodded to the investigators. Let his team out. But his eyes carried a clear message. We're right outside. Anything happens, we come back in. The door closed. Anderson pulled out a small recording device and set it on the bedside table. This conversation is being recorded. For the record, please state your name and rank.
Kira Brennan, Sergeant, former Army Ranger, current contractor with Aegis Solutions. Thank you. Now let's talk about what happened 3 days ago in Coast Province. For the next hour, they walked through every detail. The initial observation post, the warning she had given, the order to observe only, the decision to engage despite direct commands. Anderson's questions were sharp, precise, designed to find inconsistencies or admissions of wrongdoing. Brooks took notes occasionally, interjecting with follow-up questions that probed at her decision-making process. So you knowingly violated a direct order from command, Anderson said.
Not a question, a statement. I did. Why? Because SEAL Team 6 was going to die if I didn't. That wasn't your call to make. It was the only call I could make. Kira met his eyes steadily. I was the only one in position to help them, the only one who could see what was happening. If I had followed orders, 12 Americans would be dead right now. Brooks leaned back in his chair. You understand that contractors don't have the authority to overrule military command decisions. I understand that my job is to observe and report. I also understand that my oath to defend this country doesn't end just because I'm no longer in uniform. Anderson's expression didn't change. Noble sentiment. But it doesn't address the chain of command issues, or the fact that you potentially compromised your position and endangered the mission by engaging. The mission was already compromised. The ambush was pre-planned. The enemy force included American contractors working for Black Ridge Solutions. This wasn't a random attack. It was a targeted operation. That's a serious allegation. It's the truth. I have audio recordings of American voices on the enemy net. Colonel Wolf has the same recordings. The fighters were using professional tactics, professional equipment, professional coordination. That doesn't happen with local militias. Brooks exchanged a look with Anderson. Something passed between them, a decision made silently. What do you know about Phantom Protocol? Anderson asked quietly. Kira's pulse quickened slightly, but she kept her face neutral. Only what Colonel Wolf told me, that it's connected to Black Ridge Solutions and involves stolen military technology. Wolf has been conducting an unauthorized investigation into classified programs. He's overstepped his authority, or he's doing his job while others look the other way. Anderson's eyes hardened. Be very careful with your accusations, Sergeant. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm stating facts. 2 years ago, my partner, Marcus Hayden, was killed in an ambush. The man who led that mission was Garrett Calloway, former Delta Force, now working for Black Ridge. Calloway wrote a false after-action report blaming Marcus. 6 months later, Calloway disappeared and joined Black Ridge. 3 days ago, that same man led the attack on SEAL Team 6. Those are facts, not accusations. Brooks wrote something in his notebook. Anderson stared at Kira for a long moment. You're claiming a conspiracy, that a decorated special operations soldier betrayed his country and his brothers for money. I'm claiming that Garrett Calloway is a traitor who got my partner killed and tried to kill me. Whether that's part of a larger conspiracy is above my pay grade, but someone should be investigating it, instead of questioning why I saved 12 American lives. The silence stretched out. Anderson finally reached over and turned off the recorder. Off the record, he said quietly. You've stepped in something that goes deep. People in very high places have a vested interest in making sure certain things stay buried. Black Ridge has contracts with multiple government agencies. They have lawyers, lobbyists, political protection. Are you telling me to drop this? I'm telling you to be smart. You're a contractor. You have no authority, no protection, no backup beyond a few SEALs and an old Marine who's already on thin ice with his command. If you push this, you'll be crushed. Kira looked at him steadily. Is that a threat? It's a warning. From someone who's seen how these things play out. Anderson stood, pocketing the recorder. For what it's worth, I believe you. I think Calloway is dirty. I think there's something rotten in Black Ridge. But belief doesn't mean anything without proof, and proof gets people killed. He walked to the door, then paused. Your action saved lives. That counts for something. The official report will reflect that you acted with courage and skill in an emergency situation. No charges will be filed for insubordination. That's generous. That's politics. The alternative is a public trial that raises questions nobody wants asked. He opened the door. Get well, Sergeant, and think carefully about what you do next. They left. Kira stared at the ceiling, processing everything that had just happened. The message was clear. Back off. Let it go. Move on with your life. Everything in her wanted to refuse, to keep fighting, to hunt Calloway down and put a bullet in him herself. But Anderson was right about one thing. She had no authority, no resources, no way to fight an organization with government backing and unlimited money. The door opened again. Colonel Wolf stepped in, closing it quietly behind him. He looked older in the fluorescent light, tired, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "You heard all that?" Kira asked. "Every word. I was in the hallway." He pulled the chair close and sat with a grunt. "Anderson's not wrong. This goes high. But he's also not telling you everything." "What do you mean?" "I've been digging for 3 weeks. Phantom Protocol isn't just about stolen technology. It's about testing that technology in live combat situations without oversight or authorization. Black Ridge has been running unauthorized operations using equipment they shouldn't have access to. When people ask questions, those people end up dead or discredited. Like Marcus. Like Marcus. Like 4 other soldiers I found in the records. All killed in ambushes. All after reporting equipment irregularities. All blamed for tactical errors in the after-action reports. All reports written by Calloway or his associates." Kira's hands clenched into fists. "How is this possible? How does something like this happen without anyone stopping it? Money, power, the ability to make problems disappear." Wolf leaned back. "But they made a mistake this time. They went after SEAL Team 6. That put it on the radar of people who can't be easily dismissed. Naval Special Warfare Command is asking questions. JSOC is paying attention. The walls are starting to crack. What about Calloway? He's in the wind."
But he made another mistake too. He survived, which means he can talk. And Black Ridge knows that. They'll either protect him or eliminate him to protect themselves. So we wait. We wait, we heal, and we prepare for what comes next. Wolf reached into his jacket and pulled out a small tablet. "I've compiled everything I have on Phantom Protocol. Names, dates, equipment transfers, audio recordings from the battle. Satellite imagery showing the Black Ridge extraction. It's not enough for a criminal case yet, but it's enough to ask the right questions in the right places." He set the tablet on her bedside table. "I'm giving this to people I trust. People who can use it. But I wanted you to see it first. To know that Marcus didn't die for nothing. That what you did 3 days ago mattered." Kira picked up the tablet with her good hand, scrolled through the files, saw Marcus's name in multiple reports, saw the pattern Wolf had uncovered, saw the scope of what they were facing. "What happens to you?" she asked quietly. "I'll probably be forced into retirement. Too many questions. Too much digging. But I'm 63 years old. I've had my career. I can live with the consequences. I'm sorry. Don't be. This is what we signed up for. Defending the country. Sometimes that means defending it from people wearing the same uniform." He stood slowly. "Get some rest. You've earned it." "Colonel?" Kira stopped him at the door. "Thank you for believing me. For investigating. For everything." Wolf smiled. It was a sad smile, weighted with decades of service and too many battles fought in shadows. "Marcus was a good man. He deserved better than what he got. You're finishing what he started. That's worth more than thanks." He left. Kira was alone again, with her thoughts and the tablet full of evidence that might or might not be enough to bring down the people responsible for Marcus's death. 3 days passed in a blur of physical therapy, medical evaluations, and visits from SEAL Team 6. They came individually and in groups, always bringing coffee or food or terrible jokes designed to make her laugh despite the pain. Maddox brought news from the teams. "Word's gotten around about what you did. You've got an open invitation to work with any SEAL team that deploys. They're calling you Ghost Range, the woman who saves people from the mountain." Crawford brought books and sat quietly reading while she did therapy. He didn't talk much, but his presence was oddly comforting. A silent acknowledgement that some bonds were formed in fire and didn't need constant maintenance. Levi Holt came on crutches, his legs still healing. "I'm putting in for sniper school," he told her. "Because of you. Because of what I saw you do. I want to learn that. To be that good." "It takes years," Kira warned him. "I've got years." His young face was serious, determined. "Will you teach me if I make it through the school?" Kira looked at him, saw herself at that age, full of certainty and fire and belief that skill could overcome anything. Time and blood had taught her different lessons, but the core truth remained. Skill mattered. Excellence mattered. Being good enough to save lives when everything went wrong. "If you make it through the school," she said carefully, "we'll talk." His smile could have lit up the room. On the 7th day, Kira was cleared for discharge. Her shoulder was healing well. The physical therapy was progressing on schedule. The doctor saw no reason to keep her hospitalized any longer. Wolf picked her up in a rental car. They drove in silence through Virginia traffic, the late autumn sun slanting through bare trees. Finally, he spoke. "I have a proposal for you." "I'm listening." "I'm starting a new training program, teaching special operations personnel to trust their judgment over command decisions when those decisions are wrong. How to identify,
when intel is compromised, how to survive when the mission goes sideways. Real-world skills that don't always make it into the official curriculum. Sounds like a good way to make enemies. It is. But after what happened, I have support from people who matter. JSOC wants it. SOCOM wants it. They're tired of losing good people to bad information. What do you need from me? An instructor, someone who's lived it, someone who can teach the next generation how to survive when everything they've been told is wrong. He glanced at her.
The job's yours if you want it. You can work in the field or work in the classroom or both. Your choice. No one makes decisions for you anymore. Kira was quiet for a long time. Teaching meant stepping back from operations, stepping away from the hunt for Calloway, accepting that some justice might never come. But it also meant preventing the next Marcus, the next ambush, the next soldier who died because someone in command ignored warning signs or deliberately sent people into danger. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need." He dropped her Cerebas at a small apartment in Alexandria that had been arranged through the contractor network, temporary housing while she figured out her next steps. She climbed the stairs slowly, shoulder aching, and unlocked the door to find the space empty, except for basic furniture and a few boxes of her personal belongings shipped from her previous posting. She sat on the couch and stared at the blank walls. This was her life now. Civilian, contractor, woman without a country or a uniform or a clear purpose. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're making waves. People are nervous. Watch your back." She deleted it. Then another came through. "Calloway is in Morocco, staying at a Black Ridge safe house in Casablanca. Thought you'd want to know." This one she didn't delete. She stared at it for a long time. Someone was feeding her information. Someone who wanted her to go after Calloway. The question was why? To help her get justice or to put her in a position where she could be eliminated? A third text arrived. This one from Wolf. "Don't do anything stupid. You're not healed enough." She almost smiled. The old man knew her too well, but the information sat in her phone like a lit fuse. Calloway was 3,000 miles away, vulnerable, exposed. One well-placed shot could end this. Her shoulder throbbed. Her body wasn't ready. Her mind knew it. But her heart wanted revenge, with an intensity that bordered on physical pain. She stood and walked to the window, watched traffic move through the streets below. Normal people living normal lives, going to work, coming home to families, worrying about bills and relationships and mundane problems that seemed impossibly distant from the world she inhabited. Marcus had wanted that life, had talked about it sometimes late at night when they thought they might survive long enough to see it. A house somewhere quiet, maybe a dog, definitely a garden where things grew instead of died. She had promised him they would have that someday. When the deployments ended and the wars were over, and they could finally stop running toward danger. But someday never came. And now, Marcus was dead. And she was standing in an empty apartment with a loaded gun on her hip and information about the man who killed him burning in her phone. Her fingers moved before her mind fully decided. She called Wolf. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're not booking a flight to Morocco." "I'm not booking a flight to Morocco." "Good. Because that would be the stupidest thing you've ever done, and I've seen you do some pretty stupid things. I know, She trailed off. Couldn't find the words. "I know," Wolf said gently, "but revenge isn't justice, and getting yourself killed doesn't honor Marcus's memory." "Then what is teaching the next generation? Making sure they don't fall into the same traps? Passing on what you've learned through blood and pain, so someone else doesn't have to learn it the same way?" He paused. "That's legacy, Kira. That's what lasts." She closed her eyes. "When does it stop hurting?" "It doesn't. You just learn to carry it better." They sat in silence on the phone for a while. Finally, Wolf spoke again. "There's a range outside Quantico. I'm going to be there tomorrow afternoon, running some new trainees through their paces. If you wanted to stop by, just to watch. No pressure." "What time?" 1400 hours. "I'll think about it." "Good. Get some rest, Kira. You've earned it." He hung up. Kira stood at the window until the sun set and the city lights came on like stars falling to earth. The next afternoon, she drove to the range. Her shoulder was stiff, wrapped in a support brace under her jacket. She couldn't shoot yet, wouldn't be able to for weeks, but she could watch. The range was tucked away in the woods, a long rifle facility with targets set at various distances. Wolf stood behind a line of 5 shooters, all young, all focused, all trying to hit steel at 800 yards. He saw her approaching and nodded. Didn't make a big deal of her presence. Just acknowledged it and went back to coaching. She sat on a bench and watched. Listened to him explain reading the wind, the old way, through grass movement, through mirage shimmer, through the feel of air on skin. Not relying on electronic gadgets, but on senses honed by experience. One shooter, a young woman with her hair pulled back tight, was struggling, missing consistently to the right, getting frustrated with herself. Wolf walked over to Kira. Want to help her? I can't shoot. You can talk. Kira stood slowly and walked over to the struggling shooter. The woman looked up, saw her, and recognition flickered across her face. You're Ghost Range, she said quietly, the one who saved the SEAL team. I'm Kira Brennan, Kira corrected gently, and you're fighting the wind instead of reading it. I'm reading it. No, you're measuring it with your instruments and calculating the correction. That's not the same thing. Kira pointed at the grass, downrange. Watch how it moves. See the pattern? It's not consistent. It's gusting. Your calculations are based on average wind speed, but your bullet is flying through gusts. The woman looked at downrange. Really looked this time. Wait for the lull, Kira said. Between gusts, when the grass settles. That's your window. The woman settled behind her rifle. Waited. Breathed. The grass downrange flattened. She fired. The steel rang. Her face lit up with surprised joy. I got it. Now do it 9 more times. Over the next hour, Kira worked with each shooter, offering small corrections, pointing out things they were missing, teaching them to trust their eyes and instincts over technology. She didn't mention Marcus, didn't talk about the mountains or the battles or the cost of the knowledge she was sharing. She just taught, passed forward what she had learned, helped young shooters become better versions of themselves. When the session ended, Wolf walked over. You're good at this. I don't know. I do know. I've been doing this for 40 years. You have a gift for it. He paused. The job's still open if you want it. Kira looked out at the range, at the targets downrange, at the young shooters packing up their gear with the satisfaction of people who had learned something real. Can I give you an answer next week? Take a month. Take 2. The offer doesn't have an expiration date. That night, Kira drove to Arlington National Cemetery. She hadn't been back since the funeral. Couldn't face it, but now she needed to. Marcus's grave was in Section 60, where the wars of the past 2 decades had carved out a new neighborhood of white headstones. She found his marker easily, had the location memorized without trying. She sat on the grass beside it. The evening was cold, the sky that particular shade of blue that comes just before dark. I found him, she said quietly. Calloway. I had him in my sights. I hit him, but he survived. He's out there somewhere, and I could go after him. I have the information. I have the skills. I could finish this. The wind moved through the trees, the only answer she would get. But Wolf says revenge isn't justice. Says the better path is teaching the next generation. Making sure they don't fall into the same traps you did. She paused. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if it's enough. She sat in silence for a long time, then reached into her pocket and pulled out something she had been carrying for 2 years. A small medal, her own Bronze Star earned on a previous deployment. She placed it on the grave. This should have been yours, she whispered. You were the better soldier, better person. You died saving me, and I've been trying to figure out how to live with that ever since. Footsteps approached on the path. She tensed, hand moving instinctively toward her hip before she remembered she wasn't carrying. An elderly couple appeared, late 60s, dressed in simple clothes. The man had Marcus's eyes. The woman had a smile. Marcus's parents. They stopped when they saw her. Recognition was immediate. They had met once briefly at the funeral. She had avoided them after. Couldn't face their grief on top of her own. Kira, Marcus's mother, Margaret said softly. She moved forward and pulled Kira into an embrace. We hoped you'd come eventually. I'm sorry, Kira said, the words catching in her throat. I should have been here sooner. I should have... Hush. The older woman held her tighter. You have nothing to apologize for. Marcus's father, William, knelt beside the grave, his movement stiff with age. He saw the medal, picked it up gently. This is yours, he said. It should be his. He wouldn't want you to give up your accomplishments for him. The old man's voice was rough with emotion. He loved you, was so proud of you, told us about your shooting, about how you were the best he'd ever seen. Kira couldn't speak. Tears blurred her vision.
Margaret sat beside her on the grass. We know what happened. The real story. Colonel Wolfe told us. About Calloway, about the betrayal, about what you did 3 days ago, saving those men.
I should have saved Marcus. You couldn't have. None of us could have. The older woman took her hand, but you kept fighting. That's what he would have wanted. What he did want. He made us promise, you know, at his last leave, made us promise that if anything happened to him, we'd make sure you kept going, kept living, kept using that gift you have. I don't know how. We read about what happened, about you saving 12 men. That's how you honor him, by saving others, by being the person he believed you were. They sat together as darkness fell. 3 people connected by love and loss, in the memory of a man who had been better than the world deserved. Finally, William spoke. There's a new class of snipers starting at Fort Benning next month. They're looking for instructors, someone who's lived it, someone who can teach them how to survive. How do you know about that? Colonel Wolfe called us. Asked if we'd be okay with him offering you the position. We told him yes, enthusiastically yes. Kira looked between them. You want me to do this? Margaret squeezed her hand. We want you to live, really live, not just survive. Marcus would want that too. They stayed until the cemetery closed. Kira helped the elderly couple to their car, exchanged phone numbers, promised to stay in touch. It felt like a beginning, or maybe a continuation. She wasn't sure which. 6 months later, Kira stood on a shooting range in New Mexico. The sun beat down with desert intensity. Before her 8 students lay prone behind rifles. 5 women, 3 men, all determined, all fighting to prove they belonged. One of them was struggling. A young woman named Bridget Nash, 26, Scottish-American, with red hair pulled tight, missing consistently, getting frustrated. Kira walked over and knelt beside her. Stop fighting the wind. Become part of it. Bridget looked up. Show me, the student said. Kira pointed at the heat shimmer rising from the rocks, at the way the grass moved in the distance, at the patterns that most people never learn to see. There, she said quietly. See how the mirage bends just before the target that tells you the wind is pushing left. Wait for it to straighten. That's your window. The student settled behind her rifle. Waited. Breathed. Fired. Steel rang at 900 yards. I did it. Now do it again. 10 more times. Then we'll push to 1,000. Wolfe stood in the shade of a building, watching. Beside him was Levi Holt, recovered from his leg wound, now training as an instructor himself, notebook in hand, learning the teaching methods as much as the shooting. Kira worked with each student individually, offering corrections, building confidence, teaching them that excellence wasn't a destination, but a journey measured in thousands of rounds and years of dedication. When the session ended, she gathered them together. You're all here because you want to be the best, she said. Because you want to prove something to people who doubt you. That's good motivation. But it's not enough. She paused, looking at each face. The real reason to be excellent is so you can save lives when everything goes wrong. So you can be the person standing on a mountain when your brothers and sisters need you most. Excellence isn't about proving others wrong. It's about being good enough when it matters. One student raised her hand. How do we know when we're good enough? Kira thought about that question. About 12 men alive, because she had spent years becoming good enough. About Marcus dying, because she hadn't trusted herself soon enough. You never know, she said honestly. You just keep training, keep learning, keep pushing yourself. And when the moment comes, you trust that all that work will be enough. After class, she walked to her truck. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Calloway surfaced in Dubai. Thought you'd want to know. She stared at the message for a long time. The old fire still burned. The desire for revenge, for justice, for closure that could only come from putting Calloway in the ground. But then she looked back at the range, at her students packing up their gear, at Levi Holt taking notes, at Wolfe watching with approval. She deleted the message, opened her contacts, found William and Margaret Hayden, sent them a photo of her students with a simple caption, teaching the next generation. He'd be proud. The response came quickly. We're proud of you. Come for dinner Sunday. I'll be there. She drove away from the range as the sun set over the desert. In her rearview mirror, she could see the mountains in the distance, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. She had lived on mountains, had killed on mountains, had nearly died on mountains. But she didn't belong there anymore. She belonged here, teaching, building, creating something that would outlast her. A legacy measured not in bodies, but in lives saved by students she would never meet, in situations she would never see because she had taught them well enough to survive. That night, she opened her laptop and began writing. Not a report, not a debrief, a training manual. Everything she had learned about mountain warfare, about reading terrain, about trusting instinct over technology. She titled it simply, Lessons from the Mountain, and in the dedication she wrote, for Marcus Hayden, who taught me that courage isn't fearlessness. It's choosing right over easy, justice over revenge, duty over personal pain, and for all the warriors who will carry these lessons forward. The words flowed, page after page, knowledge earned in blood and transformed into something that could save lives. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice in the traditional sense, but it was something Marcus would have approved of, something he would have understood. Real courage, she realized, wasn't in the headlines or medals or body counts. It was in the quiet work behind a rifle, doing what needed to be done, even when no one would ever know your name. It was in classrooms and ranges, passing forward hard-won knowledge to people who might need it someday. It was in choosing to build instead of destroy, to teach instead of hunt, to honor the dead by protecting the living. Outside her window, the New Mexico night spread out like black velvet scattered with diamonds. Somewhere out there, Garrett Calloway was still alive, still free, still dangerous, but he was someone else's problem now. Kira Brennan had made her choice, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt something close to Pete. The last round had been fired, not at an enemy, but at the darkness inside herself that wanted revenge more than redemption. And in choosing to teach instead of hunt, she had finally kept the promise she made on a grave. She would keep fighting, just in a different way, for a different purpose, for all the warriors who would come after, for all the lives they would save, for all the mountains they would climb, for Marcus, always for Marcus, but also for herself, and for the future she was helping to build, one student at a time, one lesson at a time, one life saved at a time. 2 years later, the ceremony at Fort Benning was small, private, the kind the military holds for people who matter, but whose work can never be fully public. Kira stood in dress uniform, shoulder heeled, watching as the first graduating class of the Hayden Brennan Advanced Sniper Program received their certifications. Levi Holt was among them. So were 3 of her female students from New Mexico. 47 students total over 2 years, now deployed worldwide. Colonel Wolf, now fully retired, sat in the front row, William and Margaret Hayden beside him. Chief Maddox sat 2 rows back in dress blues, now a Master Chief running SEAL sniper training at Dam Neck. Lieutenant Commander Crawford stood at the back with several Team 6 operators who had made the trip specifically to see Kira honored. They had kept their promise, all of them. The program director stepped to the podium. This course exists because Sergeant Kira Brennan proved that trusting your instincts can save lives. That excellence matters. That one person in the right place can change everything. He paused. 12 men are alive today because she refused to follow a bad order, when that order was wrong. Hundreds more will live because she chose to teach instead of seek revenge. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. After the ceremony, Kira didn't attend the reception. She walked alone to the range. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her of another sunset in another desert 2 years ago. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Calloway arrested in Manila 6 months ago. Trial concluded last week. Convicted on all counts, treason, conspiracy, murder of federal agents. Sentenced to life without parole. Phantom Protocol shut down. 3 Pentagon officials also convicted. Justice served. Thought you'd want to know. She stared at the message. Justice. Real justice. Not revenge. Not a bullet in the dark. A trial. Testimony. Truth. She typed one word. Good. Then she deleted the message thread, pocketed her phone, and walked to her truck where a new class of students was waiting, eager to learn, ready to begin. In her rearview mirror, as she drove away, she could see the mountains in the distance. She had lived on mountains, had killed on mountains, had nearly died on mountains. But the most important shot she ever took wasn't fired from a mountain. It was fired from a classroom, from a training range, from the decision to build instead of destroy. And somewhere on a mountain, she would never see a soldier she would never meet was making a shot that saved a life because she had taught someone who taught someone who taught them. That was the last round that mattered, the one that kept echoing long after she was gone. She pulled out Marcus's old field journal, the one his parents had given her. Opened to a blank page after his final entry. Wrote in her own hand, "Mission complete, Marcus. The shot you taught me echoes forever. 12 men saved that day. Hundreds taught since then. Your legacy lives. Mine begins. See you on the other side. Ghost." She closed the journal, looked at the sunset, smiled. The last shot wasn't the one that kills. It's the one that saves. And it echoes long after we're gone. For every warrior on every mountain. For Marcus, for the 12, for everyone who comes after. The last shot echoes forever.